I'm Richard Waller, Executive Director of the University Museums at the University of Richmond. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for the opening of our exhibition, Julius J. Lankes, Survey of an American Artist, in the Joel and Lila Harnett Museum of Art. Organized by the University Museums, this retrospective exhibition of the art of J.J. Lankes was curated by Welford Dunaway Taylor, Professor of English and the James A. Bostwick Chair of English, Emeritus, University of Richmond. The exhibition and programs are made possible with support from the Lewis S. Booth Arts Fund. The Joel and Lila Harnett Print Study Center's collection holds more than 1,000 prints, drawings, publications, woodblocks, and other items created by J.J. Lankes and ephemera connected with his work. Most of the pieces were given to the museum by J.B. Lankes, the artist's son, in memory of his father. The exhibition is drawn from our collection as well as from the estate of the artist and several private collections. With more than 180 objects, the exhibition is a comprehensive look at the artistic vision of J.J. Lankes. Our thanks and deepest gratitude go to our guest curator, W.D. Taylor, for all his hard work and scholarship in bringing this exhibition to a reality. Before W.D. introduces our speaker, Kate Meyer, both of us would like to acknowledge some special guests in our audience this evening. We are indebted to Parker Agelasto, and I don't think I've seen Parker, so I'm not sure if he's here this evening. He's also the honorable councilman for us now, so maybe he's too busy to come this evening. But we are indebted to him for his involvement in the project, and we are presenting for the first time in the exhibition Parker's new online catalog raisonné on the works of J.J. Lankes. And I hope that you will all kind of give it a try tonight, and then the next time you're on a computer, it's a wonderful resource about Lankes' work. We are delighted to have members of the Lankes family with us tonight. We worked closely with the family during the planning of the exhibition, and we thank Peggy Howard, Elizabeth Lankes, Jean Lankes, and Roger Fournier for lending important early works by their grandfather to our collection. And I believe Jeannie and Elizabeth are here. It's wonderful to have you here. Anybody else from the family? Or? Ah, okay. I think you should stand up. This is wonderful, if you don't mind. That's great. We're delighted to have the family here this evening. Following Dr. Meyer's lecture, if we have time, we will take a few questions, and then please join us for the reception and to see the exhibition. I would now like to turn the program over to Dr. Taylor.
I suppose you can never get but so far away from literary matters, even though you've just finished curating an artistic exhibition. But I would like to say just a word about a metaphor that is contained and repeated quite frequently in the unpublished papers of J.J. Lankes. And I think it's a very telling image and quite appropriate for our purposes this evening. It goes something like this. He said, "In the course of my life, I have planted many trees that I shall never see come to full blossom." In other words, there's no assurance that my efforts are going to bring forth the results that I would like to see. But in so saying, he went on to say that he had faith that after he was no longer there to tend the trees, it might happen anyway. So I like to think that this evening it has happened. This is the first full-blown retrospective of his considerable body of work. I wish that he could be here to see it. He deserved to have seen it in his lifetime, and for a variety of reasons he did not. But I like to think that he's with us in some capacity this evening, and I hope that you will appreciate seeing it in full foliage in just a little while later in the evening. I did not come into this grove of trees, this Lankes land, if you will, through a straight road. I was sort of allowed to come in by a side gate because I was not formally trained in art history or in printmaking. But many years ago now, I was privileged to see several examples of J.J. Lankes' work on the wall of a friend. And when you see the catalog for the exhibition, I described that in a little preface that I wrote for the catalog. And from that time forward, you might say, I have been hooked. J.J. Lankes is not somebody who, once liked, is easily cast aside, I can tell you. And so, for more than 4 decades now, I have been happily involved in this land of Lankes, if you will, this grove that Lankes wanted to see come into full flower. I've felt at times like a sort of lonely groundskeeper because I've never thought that Lankes' reputation has kept pace with his achievement. And one of the reasons that we have exhibitions such as this is to give an opportunity of making this wonderful body of work available to people who, we hope, will appreciate it and who will talk about it, and we hope that its fame will spread naturally. And so I am not doing what a lot of curators do, which is, as one of their assignments, to give a keynote address. I feel that this person who sort of was kindly let in through that side gate has probably talked about Lankes enough. Maybe, I was afraid, one more keynote might be one too many. So why not invite someone who comes to the task of talking about Lankes through the front door? Someone who has impeccable credentials, who has wonderful experience in the field, and who can talk to us this evening about Lankes in a well-informed, charming, and, now that I know her, witty manner. Kate Meyer was educated at Kansas State University and then received her graduate degrees at the University of Kansas. She wrote a dissertation on broken ground, plowing in America's cultural landscape in the 1930s, a subject that J.J. Lankes treated in his own way, I might add. From 2004 to 2012, she was a curatorial assistant in prints and drawings at the Spencer Museum of Art at the University of Kansas. Since 2012, she has been the assistant curator of works on paper at the Spencer Museum. Tonight she speaks to us about a simple and direct medium, woodcuts and printmaking in the era of J.J. Lankes, and it's a subject that we may not be all that familiar with. We who like Lankes don't necessarily appreciate what goes in or what went in to the creation of his wonderful work. But we have the right person to tell it to us this evening. And so I welcome Dr. Kate Meyer. Thank you.
goodness. Would you perhaps indulge me by giving a round of applause to Dr. Taylor for the work you've either already glimpsed or about to see in less than an hour, because it's just tremendous. Thank you. So I come to you from Lawrence, Kansas. You can just get a frame of reference from the University of Kansas. Here it is in the fall. And you can see the back part of my building right there. That's where I am. And here's the front view of the building. There's an arrow to point it out to you. I don't have to use the laser pointer on this occasion. And I work in our print room. So I felt an immediate affinity for having a print center because this is our print study room. And at this moment, we are gathering to think about Rachel Carson and Silent Spring. So we were looking at some objects in our print study room. On another occasion, this is sort of the other end of the room. It's a tight space, but one we use extensively. And I look out for this space. I work with faculty who bring their classes in to see me. We have over 100 classes visit us a year. We can only hold about 15 people at a time, but we utilize our 18,500 works on paper for these visiting classes. And about half of our traffic comes from the usual suspects of students in art classes or art history classes. The rest is a wide array. I'm getting ready for a business class that's coming either this week or next week. Theater classes, Spanish, history, an incredible array of students who are interested in visual analysis, material culture, learning from looking. And I think that that's a very powerful way to learn. This is my boss and colleague, Steve Goddard, showing, well, hard to say from here what he's showing, but we're looking at a wonderful array of works on paper from the collection. And here's a print connoisseurship class in effect. Yeah. It's funny, this is a few years old now, but these were at one time classmates of mine, and they've all gone to the winds now in the way that people that catch the print bug, which you all, if you're not infected with it yet, you will be by the end of the evening, do. Just to give you a sense of our collection, so 18,500 works on paper, about 11,000 of those are prints, about 5,000, a little over 5,000 of them are American prints, about over 500 of them are from the 1930s, and about 200 of those are from the Works Progress Administration, which I'll mention a bit. One of my other responsibilities is to oversee our teaching gallery space, which is a space where we can select some objects that instructors have wanted to utilize for their teaching, and we'll put them on display for about 2 weeks at a time. And we're in the midst of gosh, what's up right now? German Expressionist material is up right now. It's one of the many ways you can encounter works on paper when you visit us at the Spencer, and you should. If you don't happen to make it out to Lawrence immediately, here's teaching from prints in the teaching gallery. This is a wonderful Mucha poster we have in the collection. If you want to study us from afar, you can consult our website, and here's a teaser for a wonderful James Turrell early work called Guard Blue that we have on display at the museum now through May, so there's still a little bit of time. If you didn't catch any of the big Turrell shows, you can, you still have a chance. You can come and see one. So our website, I think it's great. I love our web programmer, and one key aspect of it is that search the collection button over on the upper right side. So that's the gateway to the collection, and if you go into that platform, you could, for example, look at prints from America and then put in a date range, and so that's how I called up that 500 or so examples that you can see. Another resource is a page specifically devoted to the Prairie Printmakers, a group I'll also mention. So what I want to do is give you a sense of context, what's going on in printmaking at the time period J.J. Lankes is working. How is he involved in this flourishing moment for printmaking? It might not have been the greatest moment to make a living purely as a printmaker, but it was a great moment to make prints and a great moment to appreciate prints. And it's a wonderful time period for me to study, to see the opportunities that printmakers had to interact with one another and to cultivate fascination for and interest in such a rich form of art making. And when we think about American printmaking or even American art in the late 20s and into the 30s, it's a tricky time period to quantify in expression because it's such a wide range of forms of art. And art historians have struggled with this, and critics and writers struggled at the time. Peyton Boswell in 1929, 1930, was describing an effect he was seeing particularly in Thomas Hart Benton's work and others, where he felt like they were trying to document the look and feel of the country. And he described that phenomenon as the American wave. We tend to use the phrase American scene a little more frequently today. And then within that huge umbrella term for America, you can focus in on regionalism and then social realism. And if you want to look at some social realism from the 1930s, you might take in the temporary exhibition on Leon Bible's work that's here at Richmond right now, to see just an incredible array of the kinds of material that printmakers are doing, artists are doing in the 1930s. But then within regionalism, there's also, again, a real spectrum. I come from capital R regionalism country, Thomas Hart Benton, Grant Wood, John Stuart Curry, artists who were in looking at the seemingly local, they were also mythicizing and idealizing our shared, seemingly shared past. And that's the kind of realism, regionalism that puts Benton on the cover of Time magazine in December of 1934. But there's also, I tend to distinguish it with regionalism as a lowercase r, a sense of commitment to the local, to something very real, even if it's in the past, about home. And you find that in both art and literature in this time period, and that's where we see Lankes come in. The regionalist movement may have flourished in the 1930s and 40s, but this phenomenon, this intense focus on the local, is not particular to that time period. From the Hudson River painters to today, many American artists can be considered proponents of regionalism, of artistic devotion to place. Hamlin Garland declared in 1894 that art, to be vital, must be local in its subject. D.H. Lawrence effused in 1923 that every continent has its own great spirit of place, and he challenged artists and writers to capture that quality. And we'll see interplay between these kinds of regionalism, kinds of interest in place. And one way to get a great overview of this moment, the sense of the American scene in the 1930s, is by looking at a survey that was conducted by a magazine called Prints, a journal that ran from 1930 to 1938. And they ran a survey in 1936 asking, let's see, museum directors, print curators, collectors, critics, and artists to submit their 10 best living printmakers in America and in their region. So this is a way to find connective tissue between you here and me back in Kansas, I think, because the national list leads off with Rockwell Kent, who's an artist you'll explore if you don't already know about him in the exhibition, because Lankes cut some blocks for him. and John Taylor Arms, Kerr Eby. In these examples, I'm showing you works from my museum's collection, and I tried as much as possible to focus in on the 1930s, right around the time of this list. Let's see, Frank W. Benson, Peggy Bacon, Adolph Dane, Thomas Nason, that's shown at the bottom there. We didn't have all 10 represented in the collection, which I think is telling, and we don't necessarily have the top 10 for everyone in the regional list either. Wanda Gog, a personal favorite of mine. John Sloan, I had to cheat and go back into earlier material, but who doesn't want to see McSorley's? That's always a classic. It's a great grouping of a variety of media and approach to subject matter. You can see some people that are sort of lingering advocates of the etching revival of an earlier time period, and others that are focusing on more typically American scene sort of content. And then we're going to zoom through some of these regions. Here's New England, Martin Lewis in the upper left corner is certainly a highlight. I grabbed an example of a printing press because that's also certainly useful. Then in the east, Reginald March, you know, Edward Hopper's on a regional list rather than the national list, and you'd put him, I mean, he might win if you were to take that survey right now of American printmakers in circa 1936. So I find that tremendously fascinating. Then in the West, oh, I mean, I think you give the nod to Paul Landaker. I mean, woodcut artists, they capture the imagination, I think, with their imagery. Then Southwest, Kenneth Adams is one I'm particularly fond of. Gene Kloss is certainly great. And then here we are in the South, and J.J. Lankes is right in there in one of the tippy-top spots of this lineup. And the sense of regionalism here, what place is going where, is a little confusing. Like Dole Reed's on this list, and I think of him more in connection to Oklahoma. They're fluid categories. And then we get to look at my place, the Middle West, and some of the names on here might not necessarily be familiar to you, and not all of them are familiar to me, but some highlights on the list include Berger Sanzane, C.A. Seward, who are two artists I'm going to mention, and then you do see Thomas Hart Benton and John Stuart Curry. So, how did these artists make their way into public consciousness, and how on earth did they earn money making prints? I think one of the biggest ways artists were able to make prints in this time period is the Public Works of Art Project and the Federal Art Project's Graphic Arts Division of the Works Progress Administration, which was directed by Holder Cahill. And, you know, there were thousands of artists working for these different arena. I'm showing you Prentice Taylor, who is an artist who showed up on that southern list, and then in the lower left I'm showing you an etching by Mary Huntoon, who's from Topeka, so my turf, and she was a director of the Public Works of Art Project in my state. So that is a number of the artists on these lists really are cutting their teeth or cutting their blocks with beginnings funded by the federal government as aid work during and after the Depression. Another option, when you look at that Midwest list, if you're me, you think, where's Grant Wood? Why isn't he on the list? And the fact of the matter is Grant Wood didn't start making prints until 1937, so he just misses the cutoff for the list. Wood, Curry, Benton, and a host of other artists would have become known to individuals through the efforts of a publishing company called Associated American Artists. And they began in 1934, right around the same time that Benton's on the cover of Time magazine. The company was run by a man named Reeves Lewenthal, and he would hire an artist like Wood to make a lithograph, make a drawing on a stone, and Wood would ship the stone back to New York where it was printed by George Miller, and Wood would receive $200 for doing that, and then his print would be printed in edition of up to 250, and it would be sold for $5 in department stores or by mail order, and it'd be advertised in the newspapers. Between 1934 and 1945, AAA, Associated American Artists, published more than 600 limited edition prints. Artists are starving, Lowenthal said, and yet the people with average incomes can't afford what the artist turns out. The result is that there is little art in America and little of America for the artist. He declared, "I want to see American art in every American department store. I want to see it sold like yard goods, only faster." So this is a kind of odd moment in commercialization of art making, but it speaks to a growing accessibility of prints for a collecting public. You could own a Grant Wood, you could own a Thomas Art Benton, and then through other means you could own a J.J. Lankes. And one way you could do that was through another collecting group, publishing society. In this case, I'm going to mention a few other sort of groups or headers. The Woodcut Society was organized in 1932, and it was directed by a print enthusiast named Alfred Fowler, who is in Kansas City. So there's my connection back into you. There are many, but that's certainly one of them. The Woodcut Society was more of a subscription service for, if you were a member of the Woodcut Society, you would receive 2 prints a year, but you wouldn't just receive a print, you would receive the print with a portfolio with useful information. Fowler said, "What a boon it would be to present-day collectors of old master prints, for instance, if some 16th century enthusiast had taken the trouble to publish certain typical examples of their work in original proof form, accompanied by short autobiographies and contemporary critical estimates. That is exactly what the Woodcut Society is doing for present-day woodcuts." And here are some Lankes book plates and the print of his daughter. So this is all for Alfred Fowler and for his wife Eleanor, and then their daughter Gloria. So this is Lankes material we have in our collection, largely because of this Kansas City connection to the Woodcut Society and to Fowler. And you can also see an example of ours of a Thomas Nason 1937 print published by the Woodcut Society. The first print Woodcut Society published in 1932 was a Lankes print, but I didn't happen to have that folder to show you. And then there's the Nason print. When that first print by Lankes was issued, it was a southern scene. There was an essay by Genevieve Taggart called The Woodcuts of J.J. Lankes, and she said, "He has caught the South. Children swinging in old gardens, washing, flapping, hound dogs scratching, horses dropping, and none too soon, just in time, in fact, before it passes imperceptibly and is quite gone." I mean, that is note-perfect description of a regionalist impulse. The Lankes prints we have in our collection, as opposed to over 1,000, we only have 35. But 35 is not bad when you're trying to have an encyclopedic collection of all art ever. And so we have a nice example here. This is cutting wood, and then we have a trove of that Bavarian material. And that's the real strength of what we have, including 2 examples I'm showing here. And the one on the right, Tower of Donauworth, is included in the exhibition, so you'll be able to see that real thing for sure. What intrigues me about Lankes, first and foremost, is going into the gallery, being able to see the prints live and in person for your very own self. But then the connections I see to the kind of work he's doing, interacting with societies and clubs, and other kinds of regional artists working in my region, in the Midwest, and the amazing continuity you see in this kind of activity. Another Another society that you see in the same time period is the Chicago Society of Etchers. This was organized in January of 1910, and typically the way these societies work is that you have charter members, annual exhibitions, publications, prints that they issue, and then Chicago also was very good at donating works by its members to public institutions. And I'm showing you here an example of the presentation portfolio for Mildred Brooks' 1937 print etching Companions, which I think is a lovely one. My primary connection to this idea is a group called the Prairie Printmakers, and they were organized in December of 1930, and they met in Berger Sandzane's studio in a little Swedish-American town called Lindsborg, but their hub of activity is really in the city of Wichita. And there are a handful of members from this group that show up on that regional list: Sandzane, Seward, Norma Bassett Hall, and I'm going to gloss over just a few of them. Here is the way that the gift print would work for the Prairie Printmakers. Once they had their charter membership, you could pay a subscription fee, which was low cost, and then for your dues, you would receive a gift print. And so here's a Dole Reed, and then this is Woodbine, another print that was issued by the Society. And so many different print groups are operating in this mode in this time period. This is a Sandzane. He's working in kind of a post-impressionist idiom, and taught in Lindsborg, and was, I think, gave credence to the organization of the group because he had the most established reputation at the time. But from then on, I think others really take the wheels, including C.A. Seward, or Coy Avon Seward, but he went by C.A. So another connection, going by your initials. And here's his gift print from 1936, same year of that survey. And he's working in lithography. Also, here he is photographed with, chaps, which I'm going to toss in if I have a photo like that to be able to use. And here's another lithograph by Seward. One of the other interesting connections for me, looking at this material and thinking about Lankes publishing the Woodcut manual, is this idea of artists and printmakers in particular educating others about their art and teaching others how to make a woodcut, how to make a lithograph. And this is a strong commonality between the two, because in 1930 Seward published a manual on how to make lithographs, particularly lithographs on metal plates, which is the way commercial printers had been doing it all along, but had been largely rejected by lithographers of the time period as not the way to do it. So Seward's trying to make this form of printmaking even more accessible to others. And so many of the members of this group would make prints, but as, I don't want to belittle it by saying it as it was a hobby, but it was not their primary form of income. Most of them are working as what we would call graphic designers now. They're working in commercial printing companies. And so Seward's utilizing that kind of technology and approach. And I think really that's part of the reason a number of the prints from this group have such a strong design aesthetic. So this is the foreword to Seward's woodcut lithography manual, Lithography for Artists and Draftsmen, and a great graphic of your setup, all of the tools that you need, how you put it all together. Well, I'm going to move forward to show that he could work in relief as well. And I think it's a particularly strong example, although stylistically it's a little bit different. I think Lankes is capable of getting tight in a way that the prints from this group don't tend to go quite in that mode of tightness of carving, tightness of rendering. In the woodcut manual, Lankes said that the woodcut is a tougher medium than any of the other graphic arts, and the mere fact of its being so lends a ruggedness to the work not obtainable in any other medium. One cannot hide his ignorance of form behind a smear, as can be done in other media. It is a direct and simple medium. And I gravitated toward that part of the quotation when I was thinking about what I would share with you, because again, it struck a chord with something I had read about Seward, this primarily lithographer, but certainly also a printmaker in other media, in publications he did about lithography, both the manual for lithography, and then if you look in the exhibition, you'll see a small booklet by Rockwell Kent on how I make a woodcut. And Seward did one of those similar publications by SO Publications on lithography. And in that little booklet, he said, lithography is a drawing process. And it is, you draw on a metal plate. No other form of printmaking can prove a claim to such simple directness. So even though they're talking about completely different forms of printmaking, woodcut and lithography, they are both embracing the way they've found their niche in it, and they find it to be both simple and direct. I will argue, having tried both, that they're both neither simple nor easy, although they are direct. When you make a mistake, you make it directly. And that's why I've become an art history person rather than an art maker. But I just appreciate the commonality of language. Seward also said that he proclaimed lithography's significance as part of a larger effort to make art an affordable yet meaningful element of American life by declaring the lithograph is doing its part in the company with other kinds of prints in bridging the gap between the cheap reproduction and the expensive painting, thus bringing not only the enjoyment, but the ownership of art within the range and possibility of the average man. So, printmaking is for everyone. Printmaking is something that you can afford to buy, something that you can certainly afford to appreciate, and in so doing, you're entering into a wonderful community of artists and enthusiasts. And I think Lankes and Seward shared that point of view. And that's really what brings me to this. I appreciate the language of accessibility that these artists are using. Just a quick run through of other folks in the group. Lloyd Foltz, just showing you some more examples in relief work. This one I think has some similarity. Again, there's a fluidity to these marks that are a little different than the carving style of Lankes. I think Lankes has a very particular look. This is a lovely one, more of an arts and crafts style by a man named Leo Courtney. And then I've got to put in Logan. I think Hershel Logan and J.J. Lankes, if they didn't know each other, they should have, because they were doing, they had so much in common. Logan, along with Seward and another artist, put out a book in 1929 called Other Days in Words and Pictures, and it's a nostalgic view of the past, really focused on place, that I think would resonate so much with so many of Lankes's images. And I can't help but show you a dust storm image, because the Dust Bowl is my area of primary research. I have to sneak it in. And then this is another Logan called Threshing, right around the same time period, again, 1938. We do know he was working from a photograph here. I think that part of the print bug that you get has to do with how simple and direct the experience of looking and appreciating a print can be. And to be autobiographical for a moment, when I was an undergraduate working at the Beach Museum of Art at Kansas State University, one of my most thrilling tasks was to catalog prints and ephemera related to Hershel Logan. And the Beach has a set of Logan's tools. And I was so pleased to see a set of Lankes's tools here in this exhibition, because that's that's how the magic happened, and to be able to handle those chisels and think about holding it in your hand and producing a kind of incredible alchemy, turning that block into an amazing work of art. That's how I found my on-ramp into this material, and again, I see so much in common between what's happening in my neck of the woods and what's happened in my neck of the prairie and your neck of the woods here. The other compelling and interesting aspect of this material, this work, is that we get to be the stewards of its future. So many artists, well, the artists that were working in the American scene mode in the 1930s and into the 40s, if they continued to work and practice and adopt the mode, that was no longer in taste after the rise of the abstract expressionists in 45. And I have the most remarkable article, one of the odd aspects of the collection of the Spencer Museum of Art is that we archive the artwork that went into Esquire magazine, the magazine for men, from between the 40s through about the 1970s, which means we have an incredible collection of pinup art and a lot of other amazing photography. So we have some photographs by Dwayne Michaels from an article that I believe was printed in 1967 of artists in America, and the caption is, "They woke up one morning and found themselves forgotten." And the four men who are photographed in this photo essay are Thomas Hart Benton in his studio home in Kansas City, Rockwell Kent, Charles Birchfield, and Henry Varnum Poor, who's possibly still not very well known, but I think the other names may well be. And we talk about how artists like Lankes, certainly like a number of my Kansas crew, have been forgotten. But that's so true across the board of artists working in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And we get to, you who knew Lankes, you who've devoted so much time and energy to making sure that the work is known, understood, carefully researched, presented in a catalog raisonné, get to pat yourself on the back for bringing back to life an incredible moment in art making that it was forgotten because taste changed and not because the art wasn't worth knowing about or worth appreciating. So it's both, you know, I mean to congratulate you for continuing to foster Lankes over these years, and then also charge you with continuing to fight the fight for the print bug as a virus worthy of contamination. It's an experience that, as a fairly young scholar, I think is tremendously important. The value of a print center, the value of a print study room, the value of having an object that's meant to be viewed, this is my closer, meant to be viewed intimately, meant to be shared in an intimate way, meant to be collected in a personal way. Prints are just so good for that. And so we have both the opportunity and pleasure to be print enthusiasts and print collectors and help rediscover an incredible moment of our shared past. And I feel honored to be able to come here and talk about this with you. I feel honored every day to get to do the work I get to do, teaching from works of art in my university art museum. And I feel honored when I get to see eyes light up of someone understand that when you make that chisel-y mark into the block and ink it up and print it, that magic can happen. And the work of J.J. Lankes is certainly part of that amazing trajectory. So I'm actually going to close by thanking you for letting all of this become possible. And then I'll certainly answer any questions if you have them. also may well defer questions because, you know, we do have the expert in our midst. You had a question, sir? Well, you know, the blocks I've interacted with the most are Logan's, and I don't know what kind of wood he used, but I know they were all set type high, which again I think relates to his background in commercial art. If you happen to take in the Claire Layton exhibition, you will notice a difference between what a connoisseur would describe as a wood engraving versus a wood cut. And the reason I'm pointing this out with, even though I'm slightly deflecting your question because I don't know the literal type of wood, it would vary. If you are going to slice a tree horizontally, that's end-grained wood. And if you carve into that, it's incredibly hard, and it produces the delicate white lines that you see in a Claire Layton wood engraving. If you are going with the plain and carving, you know, cutting as the tree grows up, then you're carving with the grain, and that is wood cut. And what's amazing is the kind of fine detail you see in a Lankes woodcut, but then you could also look at a German expressionist woodcut and see much rougher, you know, gouges through the wood and see the grain itself. You don't ever, how often do you see the grain in a Lankes woodcut? I haven't noticed it yet. I mean, he carves away so much that, that it just doesn't happen to be part of the character of his work. Dr. Taylor, did you want to weigh in on choice of wood?
Well, because he worked in the woodcut, he working on the plank surface rather than the end of the block. He preferred fruit woods primarily. Applewood, pear was a popular one, and they lent themselves better to that particular technique. Though occasionally we'll see design that's cut in maple, for instance, that's not uncommon in his work.
I have, let's see, have I done anything in wood ever? No, I made a linoleum cut in high school. And I thought I would, well, I've done it since. And I just thought that this is the hardest thing I have ever tried to do. And I think on like a scale of softness, linoleum cut is so much softer and would cut like butter in comparison to wood. It's an amazing skill that he was so adept at. Yes? Well, when you take in the exhibition, you'll be able to see that great range. A number of the works that he's doing are commissions, both working in a more advertising mode and greeting card mode, and illustrations that would accompany books. And it's so, one of my favorite things about the exhibition are the materials in the cases. So don't get lost just looking at the walls. Look at the material of the room and see the way that his images have been adapted to book covers, images inside books, etc. What I think is remarkable and a testament to Lankes as an artist is that regardless of application, it seems to me that he approaches every project he takes on, be it a commercial commission or a purely artistic pursuit, as a purely artistic pursuit. And you see some other, like a watercolor for a commercial advertisement in the beginning. He also worked as a professor and an instructor at the precursor to NASA, which the acronym eludes me. So he worked and taught drafting in that capacity, and you know that's very typical of printmakers and artists in general. I mean, today too, it's very difficult to support yourself exclusively as an artist. You might be an artist who also teaches by day, or any of the above. God, maybe even half of my staff at my art museum are also artists who work at art museums, and that's true then and now. Yes?
What type of prints do you start a student out with? What type of prints?
To make them or to study them? Well, I think that potatoes. Potatoes. I think that you can take a 5-year-old with a plastic knife and have them cut into a potato, ink it up, and print it. And they have made a potato stamp print. And many, many people that, when I talk to them about printmaking, and I try to use that as an analogy, they go, oh, I do remember doing that when I was 5. You can also easily print in relief from a styrofoam meat tray. And then you can graduate from there to linoleum. The trick with almost everything else beyond relief that you can print with the back of a wooden spoon is that you need a press and you need someone who knows how to do it to teach you the subtleties of printmaking. But any art center that has printmaking material at all will often offer either an overview class or focus classes on the presses that they have, and certainly most art programs you can study relief, you can study intaglio, which is etching and other things, and lithography, and I had access to all of that in the schools I've attended. So I think relief is the way to begin, but you also need to instill a healthy sense of, see this print by J.J. Lankes. Do not feel bad if you're not going to be able to pull this off on the very first go. And that's, again, what's so charming about being able to see his very first effort. You'll see the very first print that Lankes made in the exhibition, and you'll also see how quickly he masters the media, and how far he takes it. If I'm allowed to conclude, I think that we should adjourn to see the exhibition, to pepper Dr. Taylor with questions, and to have snacks. Thanks again.